breathe, forgive yourself for literally everything, and let's get whole. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Today, today I want to talk about shame. Let's talk about shame because it has been on my mind for, I want to say about a year or so. I started to get into Brene Brown's books. Um, and she talks about shame. She talks about how hidden it is, how much we go through to hide it. And she talks about what people will do just to not feel it. And, you know, I really like focusing on the ways in which we are powerful. So if something comes up that is challenging that power, I'm going to go after it. That's just the type of person I am. Something in me, when I'm told that I'm powerless, as it pertains to something that is happening on the inside of me, something in me just says that's not true. So I want to talk about shame because I know that a lot of people feel it. I've read somewhere that if you are a person that does not feel shame or has never felt shame, then you're likely not capable of human empathy. So there's that. But yeah, I know a lot of people feel it and I want to talk about it. I want to talk about how to overcome it. Shame is, how can we explain shame? Shame is similar to guilt, but guilt is more like I did something that I feel like I shouldn't have, or I did something that I feel bad about. Whereas shame is I am something that I feel bad about, or because I did so and so, I am bad, or I am unlovable, or any of these I ams that do not belong anywhere in your orbit. And that's the difference. That's the difference between guilt and shame. And the most interesting part of shame is that you can feel both guilt and shame at the same time. So guilt will likely shame will likely trigger feelings of guilt, whereas guilt, it can just be on its own, it can go away, you know? So let's talk about shame. Now that you know what it is, guilt is more I did, shame is more I am. I want to talk about how to overcome it and how to manage it if those feelings ever do come up again. You know, one of my closest friends and I started a really, really cool routine where we'll text each other randomly and we'll just say, I forgive myself for blank. And sometimes we'll say we forgive other people, whether we know the exact person each one of us are talking about. We'll just say it. We'll just immediately expose it. We'll say it. We'll get it out there, get it nice and exposed. And what we noticed is the feeling is just a little less strong around that situation. So I think the number one way to dissolve shame is to expose it, talk about it, tell somebody, share it. And it's important to note that, you can't share everything with everybody, right? Because not everybody has human empathy and not everybody has empathy for you. So in my opinion, don't mind my dog. He wants to expose his own shame of barking at neighbors. In my opinion, the best sources to share these feelings with, number one, is somebody whose opinion you actually respect. Because those tend to be the main people we are trying to hide from, right? Those are the main people we're trying to appear perfect in front of. And although it seems counterintuitive, when you share things that you might feel shame around with a respected source, it kind of loses its power a little bit, right? Because the underlying belief is, oh my God, if this person were to ever find out, okay, well, then they just found out. Now what? Now what? Now what? Nothing happened, you know? So that's why I think sharing it with a respected source is probably the most, although scary, powerful thing you can do. And if you really think about it, it's why we respect people who are so honest about things we would never tell anybody. Like, it's why we respect people who seem to be so comfortable in their own skin. You know, it's not that they are just comfortable with everything they do. It's just that they keep exposing the things that maybe somebody told them to be ashamed of. The second source that you can share it with is a therapist. I'm a huge advocate for therapy, not because I want you to have a crutch, or not because I think it is necessary to live a full life, but just because of the work therapists do. You know, a good therapist creates an extremely safe environment for you to tell your story and tell your truth. And when you talk to one, you can really get it all out and have an unbiased source to share with. And the final source I would say is good to share these kinds of feelings with would be a support group. You know, I don't have a ton of experience with support groups, but you know, I grew up in the church girl, so that would be my support group. You know, when we meet, it's everybody in the same room looking for the same relief, and that feels supportive to me. Another thing that I started doing recently is there are certain groups online, like on social media. My personal favorites are music or manifesting groups. And even though they're private groups, a lot of them, and they get heavily screened, which is like, I didn't even know that was a thing. But I just started getting into that recently. And a lot of them are great because they share so many inspiring stories with details that I would think to be ashamed of, but they're not ashamed. And it's beautiful. And it kind of lessens the blow for me, because if they're saying something that they overcame and they're able to say it out loud or to X amount of people, it kind of makes me feel like, oh, it's not that bad. You know, you have to retrain your brain in that way. Like, it's like exposure therapy, I would say, for sure. You know, so in my opinion, in my humble opinion, the best way to dissolve shame and to overcome shame is to expose it. You know, it can't survive exposure. It can't survive empathy. And the more you share with a friend or a loved one or a respected source or a trusted source, the less you'll give power to those feelings. So breathe. Forgive yourself for literally everything. And I'll talk to you soon. It is called I'm Okay, from my latest project, Blackcurrant, which is available on all streaming platforms. I love you. Have a great week. I'm okay where I'm at.